Pandemonium at the podium. The grand entrance. Donald J. Trump stepped into the blinding spotlight to the blare of triumphant music and the roar of a crowd. The rally stage was awash in red, white, and blue banners, flags, and a massive backdrop of Trump's own grinning face. As Lee Greenwood's God Bless the USA blasted from speakers, Trump paused to soak in the adulation, chin lifted high and arms outstretched in a gesture of victory. He gave his signature wave, a broad sweep of his hand as if conducting the cheers. Flashbulbs popped like electric stars, illuminating his silhouette, the long red tie, the dark suit, and that unmistakable cotton candy swoop of hair. Secret Service agents stood at the stage edges, sunglasses scanning the sea of supporters. Trump swaggered to the podium and gripped the sides with both hands, grinning as wide as the crowd's roar. This was his arena and he basked in it. In the middle of the crowd stood Frank, an ordinary guy in jeans and a rumpled plaid shirt, looking decidedly out of place amid the sea of red hats. Frank's heart pounded. He had never been to a Trump rally before. Curiosity, frustration, and a strange surge of courage had drawn him here tonight like a moth to a very loud flame. He craned his neck to see the stage. When Trump emerged, Frank's jaw tightened. There he is, Frank thought, a mix of awe and irritation swirling inside. The showman-in-chief, live and in person. Trump surveyed the packed arena, relishing the hush that fell as the music faded. He tapped the microphone, thump-thump, then flashed a thumbs up. Wow, listen to that crowd, he boomed, voice amplified and confident. Unbelievable turnout, just unbelievable. They said we couldn't fill this arena, folks, but look at this. He swept an arm toward the cheering masses. The crowd thundered in response, thousands strong. Frank crossed his arms, a skeptic in the middle of this frenzy. He felt the energy crackling around him, fervent and almost intoxicating, but it only steeled his resolve. All the news stories and sound bites that had infuriated him over the years were now incarnate in the man on stage. Yet here he was, practically under that man's nose. Do they really buy all this? He wondered, standing among the true believers. We're here to talk about the future of our great country, Trump continued, his voice rolling through the arena. And let me tell you, the future is looking bright, brighter than ever before. It's tremendous what's happening. You know it, I know it, and even the fake news media back there knows it. He jabbed a finger toward the press area at the back. On cue, the crowd booed and jeered at the cluster of reporters and cameras. Frank glanced over at the press pen where cameras whirred and journalists scribbled notes. The wave of booing swelled around him. Trump shook his head in mock disappointment. So dishonest, these people. But we're smarter, aren't we? We know the truth, Trump said, eliciting cheers of agreement. Frank's pulse quickened. The truth? He thought. He could feel words boiling up, threatening to spill out. But he held his tongue, fists clenching at his sides. Not yet. Trump wasn't letting up. They never want to show the size of this crowd, he went on. We have thousands and thousands here tonight, might be the biggest rally this state has ever seen. He beamed as the crowd cheered its approval. Frank rolled his eyes at the hyperbole, scanning the arena. It was full, sure, but the biggest ever? The exaggeration made his stomach tighten. We're winning again, my friends, Trump proclaimed, hitting his stride. On the economy, on foreign policy, nobody's seen anything like what we're doing. But you know, there are some people out there who just can't stand to see America winning. He paused, letting that hang. A few supporters shouted, that's right, and applause rippled. Frank felt something snap inside him, like a dry twig finally breaking underfoot. The words can't stand it echoed in his mind. His vision tunneled for a second. Maybe because it's not true, he thought, anger surging. Years of shouting at the TV, years of frustration, all of it bubbled up, white-hot. His hands started to rise, and before he knew it, he was shouting. The heckler emerges. Lies. Frank's voice exploded from the middle of the crowd, loud and raw. Heads whipped around as a hush rippled outward. An invisible spotlight seemed to have swung to the source. On stage, Trump halted mid-sentence, mouth still open from his last word. His eyebrows shot up as he squinted, trying to pinpoint who had dared interrupt his flow. Frank's own heart nearly stopped. He couldn't believe he had been the one to yell. But there was no going back now. He took a breath and bellowed even louder, pointing straight at the stage, you're the one lying. The crowd erupted in chaos. Some booed angrily in Frank's direction, others gasped or laughed in disbelief. A few nearby attendees edged away from him as if he were a lit firecracker about to go off. Trump's shock morphed into a hard glare. He leaned over the podium, scanning the sea of faces to spot the culprit. Uh-oh, we've got a very rude person here tonight, he drawled, sarcasm crackling through the speakers. He waved a hand dismissively. Who is that? Maybe one of those Bernie Sanders guys. Or Sleepy Joe sent him, who knows? Laughter rippled through parts of the crowd at Trump's taunts. Frank's face burned, but he cupped his hands around his mouth and yelled back, "I'm just a guy telling the truth," he shouted, voice cracking. The crowd gasped at his audacity. "Another nasty disruptor," Trump sneered into the mic, "they don't have facts, only hate." Before Frank could fire back again, 2 security guards seized him from behind and began hauling him away. Frank thrashed frantically. With a burst of adrenaline, he wrenched one arm free. "You've been lying the whole time," he shouted at the stage with every bit of volume he had, voice cracking on the last words. The place went berserk. The mix of cheers, boos, and shrieks became a deafening cacophony. Dozens of smartphones were held aloft, recording this unprecedented showdown. On stage, Trump jabbed a finger toward the disturbance, his face flushing a furious shade of red. "Get him out of here," he barked, practically snarling into the mic, "Go home to mommy." The crowd roared with approval at that jibe, and a chant of "Trump, Trump, Trump" began to build, filling the air. Amid the melee, only one guard still grappled with Frank. With a final surge of strength, Frank tore loose from his grasp. People stumbled back around him, startled, as he broke free. Frank vaulted over the barricade and hoisted himself onto the stage, evading hands that grasped at him a split second too late. In an instant, he was up there, uninvited and unafraid. Spiraling chaos for a split second, the whole scene froze in a surreal tableau. Donald Trump stood behind the podium, jaw set and eyes blazing. Secret Service agents flanked him, tense and ready, and Frank stood at the edge of the stage, arm outstretched in midpoint. All around, the crowd was a roiling sea of confusion and fury. Then reality snapped back in an almighty crash of sound and motion. Pandemonium. Some of Trump's enraged supporters surged forward, trying to storm the stage to get at Frank. Others were scrambling away, unsure what would happen next. Competing chants of "Trump, Trump, and let him speak" dueled briefly, each quickly drowned out by the other in the cacophony. It was bedlam. Frank realized with a dizzy jolt that he was actually on stage, eye to eye with the president. His chest heaved as that reality hit him. Trump pointed directly at Frank now, jabbing the air. "You've got a real anger problem, you know that?" Trump shouted, his voice blasting through the speakers with a mix of fury and showmanship. Spittle flew as he laid into the intruder. Frank, adrenaline overriding any last ounce of caution, shot back at full volume, "I have a truth problem because you never tell it." The crowd responded with a thunderous mix of gasps, cheers, and boos at Frank's retort. Even Trump seemed momentarily taken aback by the boldness of the reply. A Secret Service agent tugged at Trump's shoulder, urging him back. Trump angrily shrugged him off and stepped forward, absolutely livid now. "The truth? You can't handle the truth," he thundered into the mic, borrowing a line from a movie and not caring one bit. Before Frank could think of a comeback, a new commotion erupted. A bright red tomato suddenly arced out of the crowd and exploded on the stage near Trump's feet, spattering his pant leg with pulp. Trump recoiled, looking down at the mess now dripping off his finely pressed navy slacks. For a split second he was stunned. Then his face contorted in outrage. "Who threw that?" he bellowed into the microphone, voice cracking with fury. The tomato toss was gasoline on the fire. The crowd went into overdrive, screaming, shoving, utter mayhem. More objects flew toward the stage, and even reporters ducked behind their cameras. Secret Service agents swarmed the stage. One hauled Trump away from the podium as 2 others tackled Frank, slamming him down and wrenching his arms behind his back. Frank's face was mashed against the stage. Pain shot through his shoulder as an agent yanked his wrists together, trying to cinch a zip tie around them. The crowd's roar became a dull thunder in his ears. Meanwhile, Trump was hustled backstage by a human shield of agents. Frank could hear him shouting protests. He wasn't done, he wanted back out, but even Trump couldn't stop what had been unleashed. Suddenly, fire alarms blared and emergency strobes flashed. Someone had pulled the alarm. The effect was instantaneous. People began stampeding for the exits, fearing fire or worse. The stampede jostled the agents, restraining Frank. One second they were cinching the zip tie on his wrists, the next, they were knocked aside by the fleeing crowd. Frank yanked free of the loosened cuff, rolled off the stage, and vanished into the panicked masses. At the same time, Trump was whisked backstage toward a rear exit, encircled by his security detail. His face was a mix of fury and shock. This was his rally, and it had descended into chaos. Press frenzy within minutes, every major news network cut live to the chaos. One astonished anchor yelled about unprecedented mayhem at a Trump rally as the shaky footage played. Commentators on other channels condemned the anarchy or quipped that it looked like a pro wrestling brawl come to life. Online, #RallyRuckus and #HecklerGate trended within minutes as clips of the flying tomato and the onstage confrontation spread like wildfire. Memes began to circulate too, Trump recoiling in mid-speech, Frank pointing like a rebel hero, the internet wasting no time turning chaos into comedy. Outside, sirens blared as police and fire trucks arrived on the scene. Dazed rally-goers and protesters flooded out the exits while reporters jostled to deliver breathless live reports of mayhem at the Civic Center. It was a full-blown media circus and the night was far from over. The Great Escape. Outside, the scene was absolute bedlam. The arena's parking lot was teeming with people who had spilled out. Trump supporters yelling and milling about, protesters chanting, police trying to regain control, and swarms of press shining bright lights and thrusting microphones at anyone they could find. Amidst the confusion, a side door burst open near the loading docks. Out rushed Frank, lungs burning and eyes wild, adrenaline still propelling him forward. At nearly the same moment, another door on the opposite side slammed open and out came Donald Trump surrounded by Secret Service agents. They had diverted him from the main exit, trying to get him to his motorcade by a safer route. But safe was relative now. The motorcade was parked beyond a throng of people and was itself surrounded by chaos. For a surreal moment, Frank and Trump found themselves outside in the same parking lot, not more than 50 feet apart. Frank ducked behind a parked pickup, trying to catch his breath and figure out where to run. Trump, meanwhile, was being hustled along the building's wall, eyes darting as he realized his usual motorcade escape was blocked by the milling crowd. "They're surrounding the cars," an agent yelled, assessing the situation. Indeed, a knot of panicked attendees and a few screaming protesters had formed a human obstacle around the line of black SUVs meant to whisk Trump away. The police hadn't cleared a path yet, and the clock was ticking. Not far away, Frank was crouched between two cars, looking for a way out of this madness. His heart jumped as he spotted two police officers jogging his way, likely searching for the troublemaker who'd been on stage. "I need to get out of here now," he thought. Parked a few yards from Frank was a bright red golf cart, one of those used by event staff to zip around. Incredibly, the key was still in it and the battery was quietly whirring. Whoever had been driving it must have abandoned it when chaos erupted. Frank didn't hesitate. In any other situation, stealing a golf cart would be insane. At this moment, it felt like salvation. He sprinted over, jumped into the driver's seat, and stomped on the pedal. The little electric vehicle jerked forward. Frank gripped the wheel and steered toward an opening between scattered barricades, desperate to put distance between himself and any pursuing law enforcement. At that same instant, Trump and his agents came power-walking around a row of parked cars, heading for what they hoped was a clear path out. The president's navy suit made him an easy beacon under the floodlights. Frank's eyes went wide as the golf cart nearly clipped a Secret Service agent who jumped back with a shout. Frank swerved sharply, tires skidding on the asphalt. Trump recognized the figure hunched over the wheel of the golf cart in a split second. It was that heckler, the plaid shirt, the determined, or was it desperate, look. For Trump, something primal snapped, a mix of indignation and sheer instinct. He was not going to let this guy steal the show and a getaway. "Stop right there," Trump shouted, breaking away from his protective detail. In a move that would be replayed on countless newscasts, he lunged toward the passing golf cart. His hand caught the roof frame, and with surprising agility for a man his age, Trump hoisted himself onto the back of the moving cart. The crowd in the parking lot collectively gasped, those who saw it anyway, and cameras flashed furiously. In that instant, Donald J. Trump was clinging to the back of a golf cart being driven by the very man who had appended his rally. It was a tableau so absurd that anyone not witnessing it firsthand would scarcely believe it. "What the? Get off my ride," Frank yelled over his shoulder, half in panic, half in disbelief. He pressed the pedal to the floor. The golf cart's electric motor whined as it accelerated to its top speed, a breakneck 15 or 20 miles per hour. Trump gripped the rear bar tightly, his hair flapping as he struggled to plant his feet on the small back platform. "Stop this thing, you maniac," Trump hollered, one hand clamped on the cart's roof and the other gripping the back of Frank's seat. His face was a mix of anger and sheer terror at the bumpy ride. Frank zigzagged to avoid a cluster of people in his path, nearly throwing Trump off in the process. "You wanted to be here. Hold on or jump off." Frank shot back, eyes wild as he hunted for any path to freedom. They veered around a news van, the cart's tires bumping over cables and sending a camera operator diving out of the way. Photographers on foot sprinted to keep up, capturing frame after frame of this unbelievable escape. Headlights from pursuing police cars swept across the lot, homing in on the strange duo. Up ahead, an open service gate beckoned. a way out of the fence perimeter. Frank aimed the cart straight for it. If he could get beyond that gate, maybe he could lose himself in the darkness beyond the floodlights. Trump saw the plan and, despite the insanity, hung on tighter. He wasn't about to tumble out now. With a jolt, the golf cart hopped over a curb and through the open gate onto a side driveway behind the arena. In the process, it ran over a discarded "Make America Great Again" sign, which crunched loudly under the wheels. The cart fishtailed onto a quiet service road, and for a moment they were out of the chaos. Frank yanked the steering wheel and guided the cart behind a row of hedges next to a shuttered concession stand, out of sight of the main lot. The screech of sirens and the din of the crowd were still audible, but they had a few precious seconds of relative calm hidden in the shadows. Frank let the cart roll to a stop behind the building. Both men were breathing hard, hearts pounding from the wild ride. For a moment, a surreal silence fell as the two men stared at each other, both trying to process what had just happened. Frank managed a crooked grin, half amused, half shocked. "Well, that just happened," he panted. Trump straightened his jacket, catching his breath. "Nobody is going to believe this," he muttered, smoothing his unruly hair. Frank let out a breathless laugh. "They will. Half the world saw it." Trump smirked faintly. "I'll just say I was saving you," he said. Frank snorted. "Of course you will." Voices and flashlight beams were approaching. They had to move now. Frank hopped off the cart. "I'm going that way," he whispered, pointing down a dark side street. "And I'll go this way," Trump said, indicating the opposite direction, away from the chaos. They paused only long enough to trade one final look, a bewildered blend of animosity and begrudging respect. Then, without another word, both men turned and sprinted off into the night in opposite directions. Back in the parking lot, bewildered onlookers and police could only guess where the two had gone. But one thing was certain: the image of Donald Trump and his defiant heckler fleeing together on a golf cart would be replayed and memified into legend. In the end, both men slipped away into the darkness, leaving chaos behind and an unforgettable, absurd story for the world to tell.